The Seoul Convention Center's LED walls blazed white-hot as 300 executives filled the amphitheater, their murmurs creating a corporate symphony of ambition and skepticism. Zahara Williams adjusted her navy blazer one final time, her tablet displaying the algorithm that would either launch her career or destroy it in the next 10 minutes. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator's voice cut through the chatter, "presenting Urban Power Grid Optimization from Chicago Institute of Technology, Ms. Zahara Williams." The spotlight hit her like a physical force. 300 pairs of eyes locked onto the young black woman walking to center stage, her heels clicking against marble with surgical precision. In the front row, Ji-hoon Park, CEO of Chulsung Tech, leaned forward. This wasn't the consultant they'd been expecting. "Good morning." Zahara's voice carried across the silence, steady, despite the weight of scrutiny. "Your current grid system wastes 37% of generated power during peak demand. My load prediction model reduces that to 8% while cutting carbon emissions by 42%. She clicked her tablet. The massive screen behind her erupted with flowing data. Temperature patterns, usage spikes, real-time consumption maps of Seoul's 25 districts cascading in perfect synchronization. "The routing algorithm I've developed doesn't just predict demand." Her voice gained momentum. "It learns from Seoul's unique patterns. Summer air conditioning surges, winter heating demands, even the energy spike during K-drama finales." A ripple of surprised laughter swept the audience. Everything becomes data. Everything becomes solvable. Ji-hoon's pen stopped moving across his notepad. The numbers weren't just impressive, they were revolutionary. "Implementation timeline?" Someone called from the darkness. 6 months for pilot testing in 3 districts. Full rollout within 18 months. Zahara's golden skin caught the stage lights as she clicked to her final slide. "Cost reduction, 4.2 billion won annually. Carbon footprint, cut by half." Energy. The amphitheater erupted into whispered conversations, but Ji-hoon was already standing, his charcoal suit impeccable, even as he moved with unexpected urgency toward the stage. "Ms. Williams," his voice carried the authority of inherited power and earned respect. "When can you start?" The question hung in the air like electricity before a storm, and Zahara Williams realized that in 10 minutes, she had just changed everything, including her life. Are you ready to discover how one algorithm sparked a corporate revolution and an unexpected love story that defied every rule? Subscribe to never miss our next gripping tale of ambition, betrayal, and the courage to rewrite the code of success. Zahara's first morning at Chulsung Tech began at 6:47 a.m. with a security badge that wouldn't scan, and a receptionist who spoke to her in slow, exaggerated English, despite her perfectly clear Korean greeting. "You find engineering department 42nd floor." The woman enunciated each word like teaching a child. "Gamsahamnida," Zahara replied smoothly, but the receptionist's confused blink spoke volumes. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave her time to study Chulsung's corporate hierarchy reflected in the building's architecture, glass and steel rising toward heaven, with the CEO's office crowning the structure like a modern temple. Through the transparent walls, she could see teams clustered around workstations, their movements choreographed by years of corporate rhythm. Dr. Sarah Kim waited at the elevator doors, her purple blazer a splash of warmth against the building's cool modernism. "Zahara, welcome to organized chaos." Her smile carried genuine warmth, though her eyes held the cautious assessment of someone who'd survived corporate battles. "Dr. Kim, thank you for—" "Sarah, please." She gestured toward the sprawling engineering floor. "Formality is for board meetings. Here, we solve problems." The R&D department buzzed with focused energy, screens displaying code cascades, whiteboards covered in algorithmic formulas, and the gentle hum of servers processing millions of calculations per second. Zahara felt her engineering soul respond to the environment like a tuning fork finding its frequency. "Your workstation," Sarah indicated a desk positioned strategically near the windows, complete with 3 monitors and processing power that made Zahara's university setup look primitive. "And your team." 4 faces looked up from their monitors, 3 Korean men in their late 20s, and 1 Asian American with thick-framed glasses, who offered a tentative wave. Character profiles. "David Chen, our systems integration specialist," Sarah made introductions. "Min-Jun Kang, senior algorithm developer, Sung-Ho Lee, and Jae-Min Park, our data analysts." Handshakes were exchanged with varying degrees of enthusiasm. David's grip was firm and welcoming, while Min-Jun's lasted exactly long enough to avoid rudeness, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Ms. Williams," Min-Jun's English carried the polished tone of expensive education, "we're curious about your approach to Korean infrastructure challenges. American methods don't always translate directly." The comment landed with surgical precision. Not quite an insult, but definitely a challenge wrapped in diplomatic language. Zahara recognized the technique immediately. She'd been navigating these waters since her first engineering class. "You're absolutely right," she replied, her tone matching his diplomatic precision. "That's why I spent 3 months studying Seoul's energy patterns before designing the algorithm. Korean summers are brutal on AC systems, and your heating demands during monsoon season create unique stress points that American grids never experience." She pulled up her preliminary data on the nearest monitor, letting the numbers speak for themselves. The beauty of machine learning is that it doesn't care about nationality. It cares about patterns, efficiency, and results. David leaned forward, genuinely interested. "These consumption curves. You isolated for district-specific behavior patterns?" 25 districts, each with distinct personality profiles. Gangnam's energy signature is completely different from Hongdae's. Zahara's fingers danced across the keyboard, bringing up comparative analytics. The algorithm doesn't just predict, it learns and adapts in real time. The data visualization flowed across her screen like digital art, and even Min-Jun couldn't hide his technical interest despite his obvious reservations about its creator. "Impressive," Dr. Sarah observed, "but theory becomes reality when we test it under pressure. Are you ready for Seoul's summer demand spike?" "I've been ready since the day I wrote the first line of code," Zahara replied, her confidence carrying the weight of late nights and endless testing cycles. As the team dispersed to their individual projects, Min-Jun lingered near her workstation, his expression thoughtful. "Ms. Williams, may I offer some friendly advice?" She looked up from her screen, recognizing the tone of someone about to deliver a warning disguised as helpfulness. "Korean corporate culture values harmony, consensus, gradual implementation," he continued smoothly. "Revolutionary changes, even good ones, can create friction, especially when they come from," he paused delicately, "external sources." The message was crystal clear, wrapped in cultural courtesy, but unmistakably territorial. Zahara had heard variations of this speech her entire career. Be grateful, stay quiet, don't threaten the established order. "I appreciate the guidance, Min-Jun," she replied with matching diplomacy. "But I'm not here to maintain harmony. I'm here to solve problems and save energy. If that creates friction, we'll engineer a solution for that too." Her fingers resumed typing, the soft clicking of keys creating a rhythm that would soon become familiar throughout Choelsung Tech. The sound of change being coded into existence, one algorithm at a time. Ji-hoon Park's corner office commanded a view of Seoul that seemed to stretch into infinity, a daily reminder of the weight he carried as the third generation to lead Choelsung Tech. His father's portrait watched from the wall, a man whose legacy was built on hard decisions and harder consequences. The morning report spread across his mahogany desk painted a clear picture. Energy costs rising, government pressure mounting for carbon reduction, competitors gaining ground with promises they couldn't deliver. Chul-sung needed innovation, not just incremental improvements. His tablet chimed with Dr. Sarah Kim's preliminary assessment of their new hire. Zahara Williams. Exceptional technical capabilities. Algorithm testing shows 94% accuracy in initial modeling. Team integration requires monitoring. Recommend direct CEO oversight for optimal project development. Between the lines, Sarah was telling him that talent, this rare needed protection from the corporate immune system that often rejected foreign bodies, no matter how beneficial. A knock interrupted his analysis. Minjun Kang entered without waiting for permission, a liberty that came with family connections and 15 years of company loyalty. Character profiles. Ji-hoon Hyung. Minjun used the familiar address reserved for close colleagues, settling into the leather chair across from the CEO's desk. I wanted to discuss our new team member, Zahara Williams. Ji-hoon set down his tablet, recognizing the careful tone that preceded delicate conversations. Your assessment? Technically competent, certainly, Minjun began, his words measured. But her approach is very American, direct, disruptive. The team is concerned about cultural fit, especially for a project this critical to our government contracts. Ji-hoon studied his senior engineer's expression, the slight tension around his eyes, the careful positioning of his hands. Minjun was genuinely concerned, but there was something else underneath, something that spoke to deeper anxieties about change and territory. Her algorithm achieved in 3 months what our team hasn't accomplished in 2 years, Ji-hoon pointed out mildly. Sometimes disruption is exactly what we need. Of course, but implementation requires team cohesion, Minjun pressed. If the engineering department is divided, if there are communication issues or cultural misunderstandings, it could affect everything. Perhaps a more gradual integration, with careful oversight. The suggestion hung in the air. Manage her, contain her, make sure she understood her place in the established hierarchy. Ji-hoon's phone buzzed with a message from his grandmother. Lunch today. We need to discuss the girl you hired. Even Halmoni had heard about Chul-sung's new addition, which meant Seoul's business community was already talking. In a culture where reputation moved faster than data through fiber optic cables, that could be either an asset or a catastrophic liability, character profiles. I appreciate your concerns, Minjun, Ji-hoon said finally, his CEO voice replacing the casual tone. But Ms. Williams isn't here to fit into our existing culture. She's here to help us evolve it. Make sure the team understands that this project has my full support. After Minjun left, Ji-hoon pulled up the security footage from yesterday's engineering floor. He watched Zahara at her workstation, focused, efficient, occasionally engaging with David Chen, while maintaining professional distance from the others. Her body language spoke of someone accustomed to earning her place through performance rather than politics. His tablet chimed with another message, this one from the building's security chief. Anonymous complaint about parking space allocations in the employee garage. Suggestion that certain spaces should be reserved for Korean employees first. Investigating source. The complaint was obviously code. Someone was testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push before facing consequences. Ji-hoon deleted the message and made a mental note to address parking policies in next week's executive meeting. Through his office windows, Seoul's afternoon energy spike was already beginning, air conditioners humming to life across the city as temperatures climbed toward summer's peak. Somewhere 42 floors below, Zahara Williams was probably watching the same phenomenon through data streams and power consumption graphs, her algorithm learning and adapting in real time. Ji-hoon opened his laptop and began typing an email to all department heads. Project Alpha, Urban Grid Optimization, has CEO priority status. All engineering resources to be made available as requested. Team Lead, Z. Williams. Questions or concerns to be directed to my office immediately. He paused before hitting send, knowing that this message would ripple through Chulsung's corporate structure like electricity through superconductors. Fast, powerful, and irreversible. But some decisions couldn't wait for consensus, especially when the future was being written in code by someone brave enough to redefine what was possible. The third week of July brought Seoul's first major heatwave, and with it, the real test of Zahara's algorithm. By 2 p.m., air conditioning systems across the city were pushing power demand toward critical levels, while her monitoring systems tracked every fluctuation with surgical precision. Load balancing optimal, David Chen announced from his workstation, his voice carrying the excitement of someone watching theory become reality. District 7 just shed 15% of excess demand automatically. Zahara nodded, her eyes locked on the real-time data flowing across her screens like digital bloodstreams. The algorithm was performing exactly as designed, but she'd learned to trust success cautiously, especially when it came too easily. Temperature projection for tomorrow? She asked. 38 degrees, Sung-ho called out. Historical peak demand territory. Perfect. If the system could handle Seoul's summer fury, it could handle anything. Zahara was compiling performance reports when Dr. Sarah Kim appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand, an expression carefully neutral, character profiles. Conference room, now. Sarah's voice carried an undertone that made Zahara's stomach tighten. The small glass-walled meeting room felt like a fishbowl, as Zahara found herself facing 3 members of Chulsung's executive team, their suits and serious expressions creating an atmosphere of formal judgment. Min-jun sat at the far end of the table, his notebook open and pen poised like a weapon. Ms. Williams, the senior vice president began, his English precise but coldly professional. There are concerns about your algorithm's reliability. Zahara felt the familiar chill of institutional skepticism, but kept her voice steady. What specific concerns? Min-jun cleared his throat. The load prediction model shows anomalous behavior in districts 12 and 18, variance rates that could indicate fundamental flaws in your base assumptions. He slid a printed report across the table. Pages of statistical analysis, highlighting every minor deviation, every moment of imperfection in 3 weeks of otherwise exceptional performance. These variance rates are within acceptable parameters for a learning algorithm, Zahara replied, scanning the data. In fact, they indicate the system is adapting to localized consumption patterns exactly as designed. Or, Min-jun countered smoothly, they indicate that the algorithm lacks the precision required for critical infrastructure management. A 5% variance might be acceptable in American academic research. But Seoul's power grid cannot afford systematic errors. The criticism was technically valid but strategically devastating, framing her success as potential failure, her innovation as dangerous experimentation. Zahara recognized the technique from every corporate battlefield she'd ever navigated. Would you prefer systematic errors or systematic excellence? She asked, pulling up her tablet to display the week's aggregate performance data. Because while we're debating 5% variance in learning algorithms, the system has reduced overall power waste by 34% and prevented 2 rolling blackouts. The executives exchanged glances. Her numbers were undeniable, but the seeds of doubt had been planted with surgical precision. Additionally, Min-jun continued, there are questions about documentation standards. Korean infrastructure projects require extensive technical validation, regulatory compliance reports, safety protocols that may not align with American development practices. Translation: she wasn't following their rules, their procedures, their carefully constructed barriers to change. I'm happy to provide whatever documentation the project requires, Zahara replied evenly. But I'd recommend focusing on results rather than paperwork when Seoul's summer peak demand hits next week. Doctor. Sarah finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. The algorithm will be tested under maximum load conditions. Real-world performance will determine project continuation. As the meeting dissolved, Zahara found herself alone with Min-Jun in the glass fishbowl. He was organizing his papers with deliberate precision, not quite looking at her directly. "You know," he said conversationally, "Chulsung Tech has always valued collaborative development, team consensus, shared responsibility for both successes and failures. And I value results," Zahara replied, matching his diplomatic tone. "Especially when those results keep the lights on during heat waves." "Of course." Min-Jun's smile was perfectly professional. "But results achieved through divisive methods can create long-term problems. Team dynamics, company culture. Sometimes the cost of innovation is higher than the benefit." The message was clear as Seoul's summer sky: conform or face consequences. "Min-Jun," Zahara said, her voice carrying the steel of someone who'd fought these battles before. "The only thing divisive about my methods is that they work. If that threatens team dynamics, maybe the team needs to evolve." She left him organizing his papers in the empty conference room, but she could feel his eyes on her back as she returned to her workstation, calculating, measuring, planning whatever move would come next in this carefully choreographed corporate chess game. Tomorrow, Seoul would burn under summer's peak fury, and her algorithm would either prove itself unbreakable or provide Min-Jun with exactly the ammunition he needed to end her Chulsung career before it truly began. The Seoul Metropolitan Government's Emergency Operations Center resembled a NASA launch facility at 6 a.m. on July 24th. Screens displaying real-time power consumption across 25 districts. Technicians monitoring every fluctuation as the city awakened to what weather services predicted would be the hottest day in 15 years. Zahara arrived at Chulsung Tech to find the engineering floor already buzzing with nervous energy. Her algorithm would face its ultimate test in approximately 6 hours, when air conditioning systems across 8 million homes began their daily battle against Seoul's summer fury. Predictive models show demand spiking to 112% of grid capacity by 2 p.m., David Chen reported, his multiple monitors displaying consumption projections that looked like mountain ranges of electrical hunger. Historical data suggests rolling blackouts are almost inevitable. Almost. The word that separated Zahara's algorithm from academic theory and transformed it into Seoul's potential salvation. Jihoon Park materialized at her workstation with the quiet intensity of someone whose entire company's reputation balanced on the next 8 hours. His charcoal suit was impeccable as always, but she noticed the slight tension around his eyes, the look of a CEO betting everything on revolutionary technology, character profiles. "Status report?" His voice carried the calm authority of inherited leadership, but underneath lay genuine concern for the millions of people depending on their engineering excellence. "Algorithm is running optimally," Zahara replied, her fingers dancing across holographic data displays. "Load balancing protocols activated, demand prediction accuracy at 97.3%, and emergency rerouting system standing by. And if demand exceeds projections, then we find out if 3 months of 18-hour days were worth it," she answered, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing her code better than her own heartbeat. By 11 a.m., Seoul's temperature had climbed to 36 degrees, and power consumption was tracking exactly along Zahara's predicted curves. The algorithm began its subtle orchestration, shifting excess load from overheated districts to areas with spare capacity, managing power flow like a conductor directing an electrical symphony. Min-jun appeared at her shoulder, his expression carefully neutral as he studied her monitoring displays. "Interesting approach to load balancing," he observed. "Very aggressive in redistributing power across district boundaries." "Aggressive gets results," Zahara replied, noting that Min-jun seemed unusually interested in her real-time system parameters. "Conservative approaches are what got Seoul into this capacity crisis." "Of course," he agreed smoothly. "I'm just documenting implementation methods for the Technical Review Board. Standard protocol." Something about his tone raised warning signals in Zahara's engineer brain. But Seoul's power demand was climbing toward the danger zone, leaving no bandwidth for corporate politics. At 1:47 p.m., as temperatures peaked at 38 degrees, the algorithm faced its moment of truth. Power consumption spiked beyond every historical record, air conditioners across the city drawing electricity like digital vampires. Traditional grid management would have triggered cascading failures within minutes. Instead, Zahara's system began its complex dance of redistribution and optimization. District 7's excess capacity flowed seamlessly to support District 12's overload. Industrial systems temporarily reduced consumption by microseconds, creating breathing room for residential cooling. The algorithm had learned Seoul's electrical personality and was conducting it like a master musician. "Load balancing successful," David announced, his voice carrying disbelief and admiration. "Peak demand absorbed without infrastructure strain." The engineering floor erupted in spontaneous applause, but Zahara remained focused on her screens. Success in the first hour meant nothing if the system couldn't sustain performance as the heat continued its assault on Seoul's electrical infrastructure. At 2:23 p.m., Dr. Sarah Kim's tablet chimed with an urgent message from the city's Emergency Operations Center. Chol-sung algorithm preventing estimated 2.3 million household blackouts. Request immediate expansion to districts 1925. At 3:15 p.m., Ji-hoon received a call from the Ministry of Energy, requesting a briefing on Chol-sung's revolutionary load management technology. At 3:47 p.m., Zahara's monitoring systems detected something that made her blood freeze. Subtle irregularities in the data flow from District 18, patterns that suggested someone was attempting to manually override her automated systems. "David," she called urgently, "pull up the access logs for District 18's control interfaces. Something's wrong." The logs revealed a story that confirmed her worst fears. Someone with administrative credentials had been making unauthorized adjustments to system parameters, subtle changes designed to create exactly the kind of variance Min-jun had documented in their meeting. As Seoul's summer heat reached its crescendo and her algorithm proved its worth beyond any doubt, Zahara realized that her greatest challenge wasn't technical. It was the enemy working from within, systematically sabotaging her success while positioning himself to claim credit for her failures. The battle for Seoul's power grid was just beginning, and the stakes had suddenly become much more personal than keeping the lights on. The evidence stared back at Zahara from her screen like digital fingerprints at a crime scene. 17 unauthorized system modifications over 3 weeks, each one precisely calculated to create performance anomalies without triggering automatic security alerts. David Chen leaned over her shoulder, his programmer's eye immediately recognizing the elegant maliciousness of the sabotage. "Whoever did this knows our systems intimately," he whispered, glancing around the engineering floor to ensure they weren't overheard. "This isn't random vandalism, it's surgical." Zahara's stomach clenched as she traced the access patterns through Chul-sung's network logs. The modifications had been made using senior-level credentials during off-peak hours, always carefully crafted to look like routine system maintenance. "Can you identify the source?" she asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. David's fingers flew across his keyboard, peeling back layers of network security like digital archaeology. "The access tokens are encrypted, but..." He paused, his expression growing grim. The timing patterns match Minjun's typical work schedule: late evening sessions, weekend maintenance windows. The confirmation hit like a physical blow. Zahara had faced discrimination before: subtle exclusion, casual dismissal, institutional barriers designed to maintain existing power structures. But active sabotage was a new level of institutional warfare. "We need to document everything," she said, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "Screenshots, timestamps, correlation analysis. If we're going to make accusations, they need to be bulletproof." As they compiled evidence, Zahara's mind raced through the implications. Minjun hadn't just been questioning her competence. He'd been systematically creating the very problems he'd highlighted in executive meetings. Every concern about algorithmic variance had been manufactured through his deliberate interference. Her tablet chimed with a message from Ji-hoon. "Exceptional performance during heatwave. Board meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss expansion timeline. Congratulations." The irony was sharp as broken glass. Her algorithm had succeeded spectacularly despite deliberate sabotage, but tomorrow's board meeting would give Minjun another opportunity to raise technical concerns based on the very problems he'd created. Dr. Sarah Kim appeared at Zahara's workstation, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp with intelligence. "Walk with me," she said quietly, a command disguised as a suggestion: character profiles. They made their way to Sarah's private office, a glass cube that provided visual privacy while maintaining the transparency that Korean corporate culture demanded. Sarah activated a white noise generator before speaking, a precaution that suggested she understood exactly how serious this conversation would become. "Show me," Sarah said simply. Zahara opened her laptop and walked through the evidence methodically. Access logs, system modifications, correlation timelines that painted an unmistakable picture of deliberate sabotage. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "How long have you suspected?" Sarah asked when the presentation concluded. "Consciously? Since this morning? Subconsciously?" Zahara shrugged. "Probably since the first week." His questions were too specific, too targeted. He knew exactly where to look for problems because he'd created them. Sarah stood and walked to her window, gazing out at Seoul's skyline as she processed the implications. Chul Sung-tek's reputation, government contracts, and Ji-hoon's leadership were all balanced on the success of Zahara's project. "Why?" Sarah asked finally. "Minjun has been with the company for 15 years. His position is secure. His salary is excellent. Why risk everything for sabotage?" "Because I represent change," Zahara replied, the words carrying the weight of every corporate battle she'd ever fought. Not just technical change, cultural change, hierarchical change. A young black woman from America walking in and solving problems that the established team couldn't handle threatens more than just his professional ego. Sarah nodded slowly, recognizing truths about Korean corporate culture that were rarely spoken aloud. "What do you need from me?" "Access to independent network forensics. If we present this to Ji-hoon, it needs to be absolutely undeniable. And..." Zahara hesitated, then decided to trust Sarah's integrity. "I need to know that you'll support me when Minjun's allies try to discredit this evidence." "Done." Sarah's voice carried the steel of someone who'd fought her own battles against institutional discrimination. "But be prepared. Exposing sabotage at Minjun's level will create enemies. Some people will see this as a foreign employee attacking a loyal Korean worker." "Let them," Zahara replied, her confidence built on 3 weeks of 18-hour days and an algorithm that had just saved Seoul from rolling blackouts. "I didn't come here to be popular. I came here to solve problems." As evening settled over Seoul's neon-lit landscape, Zahara returned to her workstation with a new understanding of the battlefield she'd entered. The war for Chul Sung's future wouldn't be won through technical excellence alone. It would require the kind of strategic thinking that turned evidence into justice and justice into institutional change. Min Jun's sabotage had been elegant and systematic, but he'd made one crucial error. He'd underestimated the woman whose code had just proved unbreakable under Seoul's summer fire, and who was about to demonstrate that her resilience extended far beyond algorithmic optimization. Ji-hoon Park's executive conference room commanded a panoramic view of Seoul that reminded him daily of the weight of leadership. 8 million lives depending on the decisions made within these glass walls. This morning, that weight felt particularly heavy as he reviewed the forensic analysis that Sarah Kim had delivered to his desk at 7 a.m. The evidence was comprehensive, methodical, and devastating. 17 instances of deliberate sabotage documented with digital precision that would satisfy any court of law. But corporate justice operated by different rules than legal proceedings, especially when the accused was a 15-year company veteran with family connections throughout Seoul's business community. Zahara Williams entered the conference room at precisely 9 a.m., her navy suit impeccable, and her tablet containing additional evidence that David Chen had compiled through the night. She moved with the controlled confidence of someone who'd faced institutional warfare before. But Ji-hoon noticed the slight tension around her eyes, the look of someone prepared for battle, character profiles. "Mr. Park," she began formally, then paused as he gestured toward the chair across from his position at the mahogany table. "Ji-hoon, please. We're past formality." He studied her expression, recognizing the steel beneath her diplomatic surface. "Dr. Kim briefed me on your findings. Walk me through it." For the next 20 minutes, Zahara presented her case with the methodical precision of an engineer and the strategic thinking of someone who understood that evidence alone wasn't enough. She needed to provide Ji-hoon with a framework for action that wouldn't destroy Chul Sung's internal stability. "The pattern is clear," she concluded, her final slide displaying a timeline that correlated Min Jun's access logs with every anomaly he'd later cited in executive meetings. Systematic sabotage designed to undermine confidence in the algorithm while positioning himself as the voice of technical caution. Ji-hoon absorbed the evidence in silence, his CEO brain calculating the corporate implications of each revelation. Min Jun's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure. It was an attack on Chul Sung's evolution from traditional hierarchical corporation to innovative technology leader. "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked finally. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Zahara could demand Min Jun's immediate termination, public exposure, legal prosecution. All would be justified by the evidence, but all would also create exactly the kind of corporate warfare that destroyed companies from within. "I want you to let me solve this the same way I solved Seoul's power grid problem," she replied, her voice carrying quiet confidence. "With data, transparency, and consequences that create lasting change rather than temporary punishment." Ji-hoon leaned back in his chair, impressed despite the severity of the situation. Most people would want blood after discovering systematic sabotage. Zahara Williams wanted transformation. "Explain. Call a full engineering department meeting this afternoon. Present the evidence publicly, with complete transparency about what happened and why it happened. Don't make this about Min Jun personally. Make it about the institutional culture that enabled sabotage to continue unchecked for 3 weeks." Her eyes met his directly. "Then, implement systemic changes that make future sabotage impossible while creating accountability for collaborative excellence." It was a sophisticated approach that addressed root causes rather than symptoms, but it also required Ji-hoon to admit that Chul Sung's corporate culture had fundamental flaws that needed correction. "And Min Jun? Let the evidence speak for itself. If he's terminated for cause, It should be because the data proves he violated his professional responsibilities, not because he discriminated against me personally. Zahara's voice carried the weight of someone who'd learned that institutional change required strategic thinking beyond personal justice. But I want him to hear, in front of the entire engineering department, exactly how his sabotage could have affected millions of Seoul residents during last week's heat wave. Ji-hoon studied her across the conference table, recognizing something he'd rarely seen in corporate warfare: the wisdom to prioritize systemic improvement over individual revenge. She wasn't just a brilliant engineer. She was a strategic thinker who understood that lasting change required more than technical excellence. There will be consequences, he warned. Some people will see this as foreign influence disrupting Korean corporate harmony. Min-jun has allies who will view his termination as an attack on traditional values. Then we'll prove them wrong, Zahara replied, her confidence built on 3 weeks of algorithmic success that had saved Seoul from rolling blackouts. We'll show them that real harmony comes from excellence, collaboration, and mutual respect, not from protecting saboteurs who hide behind cultural excuses. Ji-hoon reached for his phone, preparing to call a company-wide meeting that would either herald Chul-sung's transformation into a truly international technology leader or fracture the corporate culture his family had spent 3 generations building. But as he looked at Zahara Williams, brilliant, principled, unbreakable, despite systematic attempts to undermine her success, he realized that some decisions required courage rather than consensus. "The meeting is at 3 p.m., he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone ready to lead through change rather than manage through tradition. Time to show Seoul what real corporate accountability looks like." And the engineering department's main conference room had never felt smaller than it did at 2:55 p.m., when 43 Chul-sung tech employees filed in with the kind of nervous energy that preceded corporate revelations. Glass walls provided no privacy from the curious eyes of colleagues who sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Zahara took her seat at the presentation table, her tablet containing evidence that would either establish her credibility permanently or end her Chul-sung career in spectacular failure. Around the room, she could feel the weight of scrutiny, some supportive, some skeptical, all intensely focused on what would happen next. Ji-hoon Park entered at precisely 3 p.m., his presence commanding immediate attention as conversations died and tablets were set aside. Dr. Sarah Kim flanked his right side, while Min-jun sat in the front row with an expression of carefully maintained confidence, character profiles. "This meeting addresses a serious matter affecting our urban grid optimization project," Ji-hoon began, his voice carrying the formal tone reserved for corporate crisis management. "Ms. Williams has uncovered evidence of systematic sabotage that threatened not only her algorithm's success, but Seoul's electrical infrastructure during last week's heat emergency." The room's atmosphere shifted immediately. Surprise, concern, and the kind of focused attention that accompanied accusations of professional misconduct. Zahara stood and activated the room's presentation system, her first slide displaying the clean, methodical evidence that had occupied her thoughts for the past 18 hours. Over the past 3 weeks, someone with administrative access has made 17 unauthorized modifications to critical system parameters, each designed to create performance anomalies while avoiding security detection. Her presentation unfolded with surgical precision. Access logs, correlation timelines, technical analysis that painted an unmistakable picture of deliberate interference. The engineering team leaned forward, their professional expertise immediately recognizing the sophistication of the sabotage. The modifications were consistently made during off-peak hours, using senior-level credentials, with timing patterns that match a specific individual's work schedule, Zahara continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her accusations. Min-jun's confidence began to crack as she displayed timestamp correlations that aligned perfectly with his evening work sessions. Around the room, His colleagues were putting together the same logical conclusions that had led Zahara to this moment. "But the real evidence," she said, clicking to her final slide, "lies in what happened during Seoul's heat wave last week. Despite systematic attempts to undermine the algorithm's performance, it prevented an estimated 2.3 million household blackouts and reduced power waste by 34%. David Chen spoke from the back of the room, his voice carrying the moral authority of someone who'd witnessed the sabotage firsthand. "I reviewed the network logs independently. The evidence is conclusive." Minjun finally stood, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is ridiculous. You're accusing me of sabotage based on circumstantial evidence and correlation analysis? I've been with this company for 15 years. "Then explain these access logs," Zahara replied calmly, displaying his encrypted user tokens with timestamps that corresponded exactly to each system modification. "Explain why every anomaly you documented in executive meetings was preceded by unauthorized changes made using your credentials." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of undeniable evidence. Minjun's allies shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, recognizing that loyalty couldn't overcome digital forensics. Ji-hoon stepped forward, his CEO authority filling the room. "Minjun, you're suspended pending a full internal investigation. Your access credentials are terminated immediately, and you'll be escorted from the building within the hour." "This is about racism," Minjun declared desperately, his diplomatic facade finally cracking. "You're choosing a foreign engineer over a loyal Korean employee because her skin color makes better headlines for your international expansion plans." The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke, designed to reframe professional misconduct as cultural warfare. Zahara felt the familiar sting of having her competence reduced to her identity. But her voice remained steady. "This is about data, Minjun. Your sabotage could have caused rolling blackouts during Seoul's worst heatwave in 15 years. 2.3 million households could have lost power because you were more concerned with protecting your ego than protecting Seoul's electrical infrastructure." Dr. Sarah Kim added her voice to the moment. "Excellence has no nationality, Minjun. Sabotage has no excuse." As security escorts arrived to accompany Minjun from the building, Ji-hoon addressed the remaining engineering team with the kind of leadership that defined generational change. "What happened here represents everything Choelsung Tech will not tolerate. Discrimination disguised as technical criticism, sabotage disguised as quality control, and personal agenda disguised as corporate loyalty." His eyes met each engineer in turn. "We're implementing new protocols immediately. Independent technical audits, external oversight for all critical projects, and zero tolerance for any behavior that prioritizes hierarchy over excellence." The meeting concluded with Minjun's departure, and the understanding that Choelsung Tech had just crossed a corporate Rubicon, choosing innovation over tradition, merit over connection, and a young black woman's revolutionary algorithm over the comfortable prejudices that had limited their potential for too long. As the glass conference room emptied, Zahara realized that she'd won more than vindication. She'd helped establish new rules for corporate accountability that would outlast her individual project, and potentially transform Choelsung's culture for decades to come. The Choelsung Tech building felt different in the days following Minjun's departure. Lighter somehow, as if the removal of systematic sabotage had improved more than just network security. Zahara noticed it in the way colleagues now approached her workstation with genuine technical questions rather than diplomatic skepticism, and in how conversations flowed naturally rather than through careful cultural translation. David Chen had become her unofficial integration specialist, bridging the gap between her American directness and Korean corporate nuances with the skill of someone who understood both cultures intimately, character profiles. "The engineering team respects what you did," he explained during one of their coffee breaks in Choelsung's executive lounge. "Standing up to sabotage, protecting Seoul's power grid, forcing institutional change. That's the kind of leadership Korean culture actually values, despite what some people claim about hierarchical harmony. Dr. Sarah Kim's mentorship had evolved into genuine partnership as they implemented new oversight protocols designed to prevent future sabotage while encouraging innovative risk-taking. "You've changed more than just our technical capabilities," Sarah observed during their weekly review meeting. "You've demonstrated that excellence transcends cultural boundaries, which is a lesson this industry desperately needed." But the most significant change was in Ji-hoon Park's approach to leadership and the increasing frequency of their professional interactions. What had begun as CEO oversight of a critical project was evolving into something more collaborative. Strategic discussions about Choelsung's future, late-evening problem-solving sessions when the city's energy demands required real-time algorithm adjustments, and moments of conversation that moved beyond purely professional boundaries. "Your algorithm prevented another potential blackout last night," he mentioned during their Thursday morning briefing, his voice carrying admiration that went beyond corporate politeness. "The automated load balancing during the overnight storm was flawless." "Seoul's electrical personality is becoming predictable," Zahara replied, pulling up performance data on her tablet. "The algorithm learns faster than I expected, especially during extreme weather events." They stood side by side reviewing consumption patterns, their proximity comfortable despite the formal conference room setting. Ji-hoon's cologne carried subtle notes of cedar and bergamot, expensive but understated, much like the man himself. "The Ministry of Energy wants to expand implementation to Busan and Daegu," he continued. "They're offering a 5-year contract worth 47 billion won. The number represented more than financial success. It was validation that her algorithm could transform South Korea's entire electrical infrastructure. But as Zahara looked at the data projections, she realized that her focus had expanded beyond technical achievement to include something more personal: character profiles. "That would require significant team expansion," she said thoughtfully. "More engineers, additional oversight protocols, probably a dedicated facility for real-time monitoring. And a promotion for the project lead," Ji-hoon added, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that had become familiar over their weeks of collaboration. "Vice President of Advanced Systems, with full autonomy over technical implementation." The offer was everything she'd dreamed of when she first applied to Choelsung Tech: authority, resources, the ability to implement revolutionary technology on a national scale. But it also meant deeper integration into Korean corporate culture and, inevitably, closer working relationships with Ji-hoon. "There's something else," he said, his formal tone softening slightly. "My grandmother wants to meet you." The statement carried implications that extended far beyond professional courtesy. In Korean culture, family introductions suggested intentions that moved beyond workplace collaboration, character profiles. "Halmoni heard about your algorithm's success and your..." He paused, choosing words carefully. "Your courage in handling the sabotage situation. She's curious about the woman who's helping Choelsung evolve." Zahara felt her heart rate increase despite her attempt to maintain professional composure. The invitation represented entry into Ji-hoon's personal world, with all the complications that such intimacy might create in their working relationship. "I'd be honored to meet her," she replied, her voice steady despite the significance of the moment. As they concluded their morning briefing and returned to their respective responsibilities, Zahara realized that her Choelsung journey had reached an unexpected intersection. Technical success had created opportunities for personal connection, but Korean corporate culture demanded careful navigation between professional excellence and romantic possibility. The algorithm continued its quiet revolution in Seoul's power grid, learning and adapting with each passing hour. But Zahara Williams was discovering that the most complex optimization problems weren't always technical. Sometimes they involved the delicate balance between ambition and affection, between revolutionary change and personal vulnerability. Her tablet chimed with performance updates from across Seoul's 25 districts, each data point confirming that her engineering expertise had found its perfect application. Now she needed to determine whether her heart was ready for equally transformative possibilities. The Park family estate in Gangnam existed in a different Seoul than the glass towers of Chulsung Tech. Traditional Hanok architecture nestled within manicured gardens that spoke of generational wealth and carefully preserved cultural values. Zahara approached the carved wooden entrance with the kind of nervous energy she usually reserved for presenting algorithms to government officials. Ji-hoon had prepared her for this meeting with the thoroughness of someone who understood both his grandmother's importance and her formidable personality. Character profiles. Halmoni built this family's reputation through 3 generations of strategic thinking, he'd explained. She's not just meeting Chulsung's newest engineer. She's evaluating someone who might become part of the Park legacy. The implications were clear, even wrapped in diplomatic language. Grandmother Park received them in her private sitting room, where afternoon light filtered through paper screens onto antique furniture that had witnessed decades of family decisions. At 78, she commanded attention through presence rather than volume. Silver hair arranged in elegant precision, traditional hanbok in shades of blue that complemented her sharp intelligence. "Ms. Williams," she said in English that carried the precision of expensive education. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." The next hour unfolded like a masterclass in Korean social navigation, as Halmoni asked questions that seemed casual but probed deeply into Zahara's background, motivations, and understanding of the cultural complexities she'd entered by joining Chulsung. "Your algorithm impressed the Ministry of Energy," Halmoni observed, pouring tea with ceremonial precision. "But technical success is temporary. Character endures. Tell me about your family." Zahara spoke about growing up in Chicago, her parents' emphasis on education as a pathway to opportunity, the scholarship that had made MIT possible despite financial constraints. She described the isolation of being one of 3 Black students in her engineering program, the additional pressure of representing her entire race in every classroom and laboratory. "And now you represent more than yourself at Chulsung," Halmoni noted perceptively. "How does that responsibility feel?" "Heavy," Zahara admitted honestly, "but necessary. Change requires people willing to be visible, to absorb criticism, to prove that excellence transcends the categories others use to limit us." Halmoni's expression revealed nothing, but her questions grew more personal. "My grandson speaks highly of your professional capabilities, but I notice he speaks of you often, even when business discussions don't require it." The observation hung in the air between them, carrying implications that made Zahara's heart race despite her attempt to maintain composure. Character profiles. "Ji-hoon has been an exceptional leader during a difficult transition," Zahara replied carefully. "His support made the difference between my success and failure at Chulsung." "Yes," Halmoni agreed. "But leadership takes many forms. Some leaders manage businesses, others transform them. Still others transform the people within them." Her eyes studied Zahara with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading character through careful observation. "Which type of leader do you see in my grandson?" The question demanded honesty, rather than diplomacy. "All 3, Zahara answered, "but especially the third. He's choosing evolution over tradition, merit over connection, innovation over comfort. That requires personal courage, not just corporate strategy." For the first time, Halmoni smiled, the expression that transformed her entire face from formidable to warmly approving. "Korean culture values harmony, Ms. Williams, but true harmony comes from strength, not compliance. My grandson was raised to lead Chulsung into the future, but he needed someone to help him understand what that future should look like." She set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "I believe he found that someone," The endorsement was subtle, but unmistakable, carrying the weight of someone whose approval could either elevate or destroy relationships within Seoul's interconnected business community. However, Halmoni continued, her tone becoming more serious, intercultural relationships face challenges that purely Korean marriages do not. Business rivals will use your relationship to attack Chulsung's reputation. Traditional families will question Ji-hoon's commitment to Korean values. Media attention will be intense and not always favorable. I understand the risks, Zahara replied, though the full implications were still sinking in. But running from challenges has never been my approach to problem solving. Halmoni laughed, a sound of genuine delight that filled the traditional sitting room with unexpected warmth. Good. Because the Park family has never backed down from worthwhile fights, and I suspect the Williams family shares that characteristic. As their meeting concluded with traditional courtesies and promises of future visits, Zahara realized that she just received something rarer than professional success: acceptance from the matriarch of one of Seoul's most influential families, character profiles. Walking through the estate's gardens with Ji-hoon as evening settled over Seoul's sprawling landscape, she felt the weight of new possibilities and responsibilities. The algorithm continued its quiet work throughout the city's power grid, but Zahara Williams was discovering that the most transformative optimization problems involved the delicate calibration of professional ambition with personal happiness. She likes you, Ji-hoon observed with obvious relief as they reached his car. She approves of me, Zahara corrected gently. There's a difference, but I think that's more important than being liked. As Seoul's lights began their nightly dance across the Han River, Zahara understood that her Chulsung journey had evolved far beyond technical innovation into something that would require every bit of her engineering precision applied to the far more complex algorithms of the human heart. The Korean tech media discovered Zahara Williams on a Wednesday morning in August, when Seoul Economic Daily published a front-page profile titled "The Algorithm Queen: How an American Engineer Revolutionized Seoul's Power Grid." By Thursday, her photograph was circulating through social media channels with commentary that ranged from admiration to barely disguised hostility. "Foreign talent transforms Korean infrastructure," read one headline. "American genius saves Seoul from blackouts," declared another. But the comment sections told a different story. Angry voices questioning why Korean companies needed foreign solutions, why talented local engineers were being overlooked, why Chulsung Tech was prioritizing diversity over domestic expertise. Zahara discovered the media storm when her phone buzzed with 17 missed calls before 7 a.m., including 3 from reporters seeking interviews and 2 from competitors offering unsolicited job opportunities. The attention felt like standing naked under stadium lights, every aspect of her professional and personal life suddenly subject to public scrutiny. "This is exactly what I was afraid of, Dr. A," Sarah Kim admitted during their emergency meeting in her office, the white noise generator humming at maximum volume. Korean media loves success stories, but they love controversy even more. Your relationship with Ji-hoon will be their next target. The prediction proved accurate within hours. By afternoon, Korean entertainment blogs had published speculation about Chulsung's mysterious romance between CEO and foreign engineer, complete with telephoto shots of Zahara and Ji-hoon leaving the Park family estate. Ji-hoon appeared at her workstation as the engineering floor buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that accompanied company-wide crises. His expression carried the controlled tension of someone accustomed to media attention, but concerned about its effect on people he cared about, character profiles. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Conference Room B." The glass-walled space felt like a fishbowl as curious colleagues pretended not to watch their closed-door conversation. Ji-hoon activated the room's privacy screens before speaking, his CEO mask slipping to reveal genuine worry. "The board is concerned about media attention affecting our government contracts," He began carefully. Some members feel that personal relationships between executives create unnecessary complications for corporate reputation management. The euphemistic language barely concealed the real message. Their growing connection was being viewed as a liability that threatened Cholsung's business interests. "What are you saying?" Zahara asked, though part of her already understood where this conversation was heading. "I'm saying that some very powerful people believe our professional relationship should remain strictly professional." Ji-hoon's voice carried the weight of someone being forced to choose between personal desires and corporate responsibilities. "At least until media interest dies down and your project status is permanently established." The suggestion felt like a punch to her solar plexus. After weeks of careful courtship, disguised as professional collaboration, after meeting his grandmother and receiving family approval, after beginning to imagine possibilities that extended beyond algorithm optimization, now corporate politics demanded emotional distance. "And what do you believe?" she asked, her engineer's mind automatically seeking the logical foundation beneath institutional pressure. Ji-hoon moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I believe that some risks are worth taking, regardless of what other people think. But I also believe that your career shouldn't be damaged by association with me." The consideration was touching, but infuriating. Zahara had spent her entire professional life proving that her competence transcended other people's limitations, and now the man she was beginning to care about was trying to protect her from consequences. She was perfectly capable of handling herself. "Ji-hoon," she said firmly, "I didn't survive MIT's engineering program, move to Seoul, revolutionize your power grid, and expose systematic sabotage just to let corporate gossip dictate my personal choices. If the board has concerns about my professional capabilities, they can review my performance data. If they have concerns about my personal life, they can review their own policies." Her defiance seemed to both surprise and relieve him. "The media attention will intensify. There will be criticism, speculation, probably some ugly commentary about intercultural relationships. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" "Are you?" she countered, recognizing that his position as Cholsung's CEO made him equally vulnerable to public judgment. Before he could answer, David Chen knocked on the conference room door with the kind of urgency that suggested technical crisis. "Zahara, we have a problem with the algorithm. District 15 is showing massive consumption spikes that don't match weather or usage patterns." The personal conversation was immediately shelved as they raced back to the engineering floor, where Zahara's monitoring systems displayed the kind of anomalous data that made her blood freeze. Someone was attacking Seoul's power grid, and they were using sophisticated methods designed to overwhelm her algorithm's load-balancing capabilities. "This isn't natural demand," she announced to the assembled engineering team, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards as she traced the attack's digital signature. "Someone is artificially inflating power consumption to trigger cascade failures." As Seoul's afternoon energy demands climbed toward dangerous levels, and her algorithm struggled against deliberate sabotage that made Min-jun's interference look amateurish, Zahara realized that media attention was the least of her problems. The real battle for Cholsung's future, and her place within it, was just beginning. And this time the enemy was coming from outside the company walls with resources and motivations that extended far beyond personal jealousy or cultural prejudice. The attack on Seoul's power grid escalated at 3:17 p.m. with the methodical precision of military-grade cyber warfare. Zahara's monitoring systems lit up like digital Christmas trees as artificial demand surges hit 6 districts simultaneously, each spike calibrated to overwhelm her algorithm's load-balancing capabilities. "This isn't random," David Chen announced from his workstation, his multiple monitors displaying attack vectors that formed recognizable patterns. "Someone studied your algorithm extensively before designing countermeasures. They know exactly how the system redistributes excess load." Zahara felt cold certainty settle in her stomach as she traced the attack's sophistication. The timing, the target selection, the precise knowledge of her system's architecture. This was insider information being weaponized against Seoul's electrical infrastructure. Ji-hoon appeared at the engineering floor's emergency command center, his CEO authority cutting through the controlled chaos as technicians worked to prevent citywide blackouts. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying the steel of someone whose company's reputation balanced on the next few hours. "Coordinated attack across multiple districts," Zahara replied, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she attempted to isolate and counter each surge. "Someone's using detailed knowledge of our load-balancing algorithms to create targeted overloads. They're trying to force cascade failures that will look like system design flaws." The implication was unmistakable. This wasn't just cyber-terrorism. It was corporate warfare designed to destroy Chulsung's credibility and potentially cost them billions in government contracts. Dr. Sarah Kim burst through the department's glass doors with tablet in hand, an expression grim. "I've been monitoring external network traffic. The attack is being coordinated from 7 different international IP addresses, but the command structure suggests domestic knowledge and planning." "Min-jun," David said quietly, voicing what everyone in the room had begun to suspect. "Min-jun's been terminated for 3 weeks, Ji-hoon pointed out. "His access was revoked immediately." "But his knowledge wasn't," Zahara replied, her mind racing through possibilities as Seoul's power consumption continued climbing toward critical levels. "He understood my algorithm's architecture better than anyone except David and me. If he's working with external actors..." Her tablet chimed with an urgent message from Seoul Metropolitan Emergency Services. "Chulsung algorithm showing instability. Prepare for manual override if automated systems fail." The message represented institutional loss of confidence that could destroy Chulsung's reputation permanently. Zahara realized she had maybe 20 minutes to prove her system's resilience before the city government reverted to traditional grid management, and probably terminated their contract in the process. "I need access to the core infrastructure protocols," she announced, her voice cutting through the technical discussions surrounding her. "Not just the monitoring systems, direct control over power routing decisions." "That's against every safety protocol we have," one of the senior engineers protested. "Manual override of automated systems during peak demand could trigger exactly the cascade failures we're trying to prevent." "The cascade failures are already being triggered," Zahara shot back, her eyes locked on consumption data that showed the attacks intensifying. "The only question is whether we're going to let attackers control Seoul's power grid or whether we're going to fight back with better algorithms." Ji-hoon stepped forward, his CEO authority weighing the risks of giving unprecedented control to someone who'd been with the company less than 2 months. But his eyes met Zahara's across the emergency command center, and she could see him making the same calculation she'd made. Sometimes breakthrough innovation required trust beyond institutional comfort zones. "Give her full access," he commanded, his voice carrying the kind of leadership that defined corporate legends or corporate disasters. Zahara's fingers flew across her keyboard as she implemented real-time modifications to her load-balancing algorithms, turning the system's predictive capabilities into active countermeasures against the ongoing attack. Where the attackers expected automated redistribution, she provided manual precision. Where they created artificial spikes, she opened alternative routing channels they hadn't anticipated. "District 15 stabilizing," David announced, his voice carrying the first note of optimism in 30 minutes. "Districts 7 and 12 showing normal consumption patterns," Sarah added from her monitoring station. But Zahara could see that the attackers were adapting to her countermeasures, their assault evolving with machine learning precision that suggested they had algorithmic support of their own. This wasn't just corporate sabotage. It was a technological arms race being fought in real time across Seoul's electrical infrastructure. "They're using AI to counter my modifications," she announced grimly. "Every adjustment I make, they're developing responses within minutes. We're fighting algorithmic warfare." The realization sent chills through the engineering team. If the attackers had artificial intelligence support, Zahara's human reaction speed, no matter how brilliant, might not be sufficient to protect Seoul's 8 million residents from rolling blackouts. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the city and power consumption climbed toward evening peak demand, Zahara Williams prepared to engage in the most critical battle of her engineering career. Not just for Cholsung's future, but for the millions of people whose lives depended on the lights staying on when Seoul's summer heat demanded every kilowatt of electrical power the grid could provide. The war for Seoul's electrical infrastructure reached its crescendo at 4:43 p.m. as Zahara realized she was fighting not just coordinated cyber attacks, but a rival artificial intelligence system designed specifically to counter her load-balancing algorithms. The enemy AI learned from her defensive moves with terrifying speed, adapting its assault patterns faster than human reflexes could respond. "They're using machine learning to predict our responses," she announced to the assembled crisis team, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the challenge. "Every countermeasure we implement gets analyzed and countered within 3 to 4 minutes." David Chen looked up from his monitoring station, his expression carrying the grim recognition of someone watching technological warfare in real time. "So we're fighting an AI that was trained on your algorithm's behavior patterns. That's why Min Jun's inside knowledge was so valuable. He could provide training data for their system." The pieces were falling into place with crystalline clarity. Min Jun hadn't just stolen technical specifications. He'd provided enough architectural knowledge for competitors to build AI specifically designed to weaponize Zahara's own innovations against Seoul's power grid. Ji-hoon moved through the emergency command center with the controlled intensity of a military commander, his CEO authority keeping the engineering team focused despite the escalating crisis. "What do you need to win this?" he asked Zahara directly, cutting through technical discussions to reach strategic essentials. "I need to make the algorithm do something it's never done before," she replied, her mind racing through possibilities as power consumption data flowed across her screens like digital warfare. The enemy AI was trained on predictable load balancing behavior. If I can make our system completely unpredictable. The idea was dangerous beyond institutional comfort zones, deliberately introducing chaos into Seoul's electrical infrastructure during peak demand, betting that controlled randomness could defeat systematic attack better than systematic defense. "Explain," Dr. Sarah Kim demanded from her observation post. "I'm going to implement quantum randomization protocols," Zahara announced, her fingers already coding modifications that would make her colleagues' engineering minds cringe. "Instead of predictable load redistribution based on efficiency algorithms, we'll use quantum number generation to create redistribution patterns that no AI can predict because they're fundamentally unpredictable." The silence that followed carried the weight of professional skepticism mixed with desperate hope. Quantum randomization might confuse the attacking AI, but it could also destabilize Seoul's power grid beyond any hope of recovery. "That's insane," one senior engineer protested. "You're talking about introducing random variables into critical infrastructure during the worst cyber attack in Korean history." "I'm talking about fighting unpredictability with unpredictability," Zahara countered, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd spent 3 months studying Seoul's electrical personality, until she knew it better than her own heartbeat. "The algorithm has learned Seoul's consumption patterns so thoroughly that I can introduce controlled chaos without threatening grid stability." Ji-hoon studied her across the command center, recognizing the moment when leadership required betting everything on exceptional talent. "Do it," he commanded, his authority cutting through technical objections. Zahara's modifications flowed into Seoul's power grid like digital lightning, transforming predictable load balancing into quantum-assisted chaos that no machine learning system could anticipate. Where the enemy AI expected mathematical precision, it encountered genuine randomness. Where it predicted redistribution patterns, it found decisions based on quantum mechanics rather than algorithmic logic. The results were immediate and spectacular. Attack vectors that had been succeeding for 2 hours suddenly became ineffective as Zahara's quantum randomization created power routing patterns that defied every predictive model. The enemy AI, trained on systematic behavior, couldn't adapt to genuine unpredictability. Districts 3, 7, and 15 showing normal consumption, David announced, his voice carrying growing excitement. Whatever you did, their attack patterns are failing. Quantum randomization is working, Zahara confirmed, watching her monitors display the digital equivalent of victory as Seoul's power grid stabilized despite continued assault attempts. The enemy AI can't predict quantum-generated decisions because quantum mechanics is fundamentally unpredictable. By 5:30 p.m., the cyber attack had effectively ended. Not because the attackers had given up, but because their artificial intelligence system couldn't function against an opponent that made decisions based on quantum uncertainty rather than algorithmic logic. As Seoul's evening energy demands settled into manageable patterns, and Chol-sung's engineering team began documenting their successful defense against state-sponsored cyber warfare, Zahara Williams realized she'd just fought and won the first recorded battle between competing artificial intelligence systems, using randomness as her secret weapon against enemies who had expected predictable excellence. The victory belonged not just to her engineering brilliance, but to the team that had trusted her unconventional solutions and the CEO who'd been willing to bet Seoul's electrical infrastructure on quantum mechanics and controlled chaos. The Seoul Metropolitan Emergency Operations Center officially declared the cyber attack neutralized at 6:47 p.m., but the investigation into its origins was just beginning. Zahara found herself in Chol-sung's executive conference room at 7 p.m., surrounded by government officials, cybersecurity experts, and telecommunications forensics teams, all trying to understand how Korean infrastructure had just survived its most sophisticated attack in decades. The algorithmic complexity suggests state-level resources, reported the National Intelligence Service representative, her tablet displaying network analysis that traced attack vectors across 3 continents. This wasn't corporate espionage. This was economic warfare designed to undermine confidence in Korean technological independence. Ji-hoon absorbed the briefing with the controlled intensity of someone whose company had just become a target of international significance. Chul-sung Tech was no longer just a successful Korean corporation. It had become a strategic asset that enemies wanted to neutralize. Ms. Williams's quantum randomization defense was brilliant, the cybersecurity expert continued, but it also revealed something troubling. The attacking AI had detailed knowledge of your algorithm's base architecture, suggesting extended surveillance or inside information. David Chen spoke from his position at the conference table's data analysis station. I've been tracing the information pathways used by the attacking system. The behavioral predictions were too accurate to be based on external observation alone. Someone provided detailed documentation of our load balancing protocols. The implications settled over the room like digital fog. Minjun's sabotage had extended beyond simple parameter adjustments to wholesale intelligence gathering that had been transmitted to hostile actors. Where is Minjun Kang now? The NIS representative asked, her tone suggesting that corporate termination was no longer sufficient consequence for potential treason. Unknown, Ji-hoon replied grimly. He left Seoul 3 days after his dismissal. His credit cards show purchases in Bangkok, then Singapore. After that, no digital trail. Zahara felt cold certainty spreading through her chest as she connected the timeline. The cyber attack had been planned and resourced long before Minjun's termination. His sabotage hadn't been desperate revenge. It had been systematic intelligence gathering for a much larger assault on Korean infrastructure. He was never working alone, she announced, her engineer's mind organizing evidence into logical conclusions. The internal sabotage, the media attention designed to create institutional pressure, the sophisticated cyber attack, it's all coordinated. Someone wanted to discredit the algorithm publicly before attacking it digitally. Dr. Sarah Kim nodded grimly from her seat at the conference table. Corporate warfare disguised as technical criticism. If the algorithm had failed during today's attack, Chulsung would have lost not just government contracts, but credibility throughout the entire technology sector. The meeting continued for another hour as officials documented evidence, planned countermeasures, and discussed the broader implications of algorithmic warfare against critical infrastructure. But Zahara's attention was increasingly focused on a different calculation: the personal cost of becoming a strategic asset in technological conflicts that extended far beyond corporate competition. As government representatives departed with promises of enhanced security protocols and ongoing investigation support, Ji-hoon approached her workstation, where she was compiling post-crisis performance reports. The Ministry of Energy wants to expand your algorithm to every major city in South Korea, he said quietly. They're also requesting that you become a permanent advisor on cybersecurity protocols for critical infrastructure. The offers represented everything she'd dreamed of when she first arrived in Seoul: recognition, authority, the opportunity to implement revolutionary technology on a national scale. But they also meant permanent visibility as a target for anyone who wanted to damage Korean technological capabilities. "And what do you want?" she asked, looking up from performance data that showed her quantum randomization protocols had not only defeated the attack, but actually improved Seoul's power grid efficiency. Ji-hoon moved closer, his voice dropping to the intimate tone that had become familiar during their late-night technical discussions. "I want you to be safe. I want Chulsung to be strong. And I want to find out whether we can build something together that's more powerful than either of our individual contributions." The confession carried weight that extended beyond professional collaboration into territory that made Zahara's heart race, despite her attempt to maintain analytical composure. Character profiles. "The media attention will be intense," she pointed out. "Government advisors don't get privacy. Corporate romance involving strategic assets gets scrutinized by intelligence agencies. Are you prepared for that level of institutional oversight of our personal lives?" "Are you?" he countered, echoing her earlier challenge, but with the additional complexity of someone whose decisions affected national security as well as corporate success. Before she could answer, her monitoring systems chimed with the gentle notification that Seoul's evening power consumption was settling into optimal patterns, her algorithm learning and adapting even as she contemplated questions that would reshape both her professional and personal future. Zahara Williams had come to Seoul to prove her technical competence. She'd succeeded beyond her wildest projections, but success had created new challenges that required more than engineering expertise to navigate. 3 weeks after the cyber attack, Chulsung Tech had become Seoul's most closely watched corporation, with government security details, media attention, and competitor surveillance, creating a corporate environment that resembled a technological embassy more than a private business. Zahara's workstation now included cybersecurity monitoring that tracked every keystroke, while her algorithm managed power grids in Seoul, Busan, and Daegu with performance metrics that had attracted international attention. The Korean National Assembly had scheduled hearings on critical infrastructure protection, with Zahara designated as the primary technical witness, a role that would make her the public face of Korean technological innovation while simultaneously making her a permanent target for economic espionage. "The Americans are offering citizenship acceleration in Silicon Valley positions," Dr. Sarah Kim mentioned during their morning briefing, her tone carefully neutral as she discussed recruitment attempts that had become weekly occurrences. Google's quantum computing division, Apple's energy systems group, Tesla's grid optimization team. Apparently, your quantum randomization protocols have created a bidding war. Zahara absorbed the information while monitoring real-time power consumption across 3 cities, her algorithm's learning capabilities now managing electrical infrastructure for 12 million Korean residents. The offers were tempting. financial security, research resources, the opportunity to work with the world's most advanced technology companies. "And the Korean offers?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the scope of domestic interest. Full professorship at Seoul National University, director-level position with the Ministry of Energy, chief technology officer roles with Samsung and LG. Sarah listed the opportunities with the satisfaction of someone watching her mentorship succeed spectacularly, plus permanent residency fast-track and government security protection. The choices represented different paths toward the same destination, technological leadership that would define her career for decades. But they also represented something more complex. The intersection of professional success with personal relationships that had grown beyond corporate boundaries, character profiles. Ji-hoon appeared at her workstation with the quiet intensity that had become familiar, his presence commanding attention even in Chol-sung's increasingly secure environment. The past 3 weeks had transformed their working relationship into something more collaborative and intimate. Late-night problem-solving sessions evolving into conversations that explored territory far beyond algorithmic optimization. "Walk with me," he said, a request that had become code for discussions requiring privacy beyond Chol-sung's glass-walled transparency. They made their way to the building's executive terrace, where Seoul's afternoon skyline provided backdrop for conversations that mixed corporate strategy with personal confession. The city's electrical infrastructure hummed invisibly beneath them, managed by algorithms that had revolutionized Korean energy efficiency while creating new categories of international competition. "The board approved the Incheon expansion this morning," Ji-hoon announced, settling beside her at the terrace's steel railing. "Your algorithm will be managing 40% of South Korea's electrical infrastructure within 6 months." The achievement represented professional success beyond anything she'd imagined when first presenting her load-balancing concepts to 300 skeptical executives. But Ji-hoon's expression suggested complications beneath the celebration. "There's a condition," he continued, his voice carrying the tension of someone delivering unwelcome news. "The Ministry of Energy requires that all critical infrastructure personnel undergo comprehensive background investigations, including family history, financial records, and personal relationship assessments." The implication was clear. Their growing connection would become subject to government scrutiny that extended far beyond corporate human resources policies. Intelligence agencies would evaluate whether their personal relationship represented security risks to national infrastructure. "They're not questioning your competence," Ji-hoon clarified quickly. "They're concerned about emotional leverage that hostile actors might use against someone with access to critical systems." Zahara understood the logic even as it frustrated her engineering sensibilities. Personal relationships created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by enemies seeking to manipulate or coerce strategic assets. Her algorithm's success had made her personally important to Korean national security. "What kind of assessment?" she asked, though part of her already anticipated the invasive nature of security investigations. "Background checks extending to childhood, financial analysis including family economic history, psychological evaluation to assess susceptibility to coercion." Ji-hoon listed the requirements with the tone of someone who'd already undergone similar scrutiny, plus ongoing monitoring of personal relationships to ensure they don't create security vulnerabilities. The price of technological innovation was becoming clear. Professional success at the highest levels required surrendering personal privacy to institutional oversight. "And if our relationship is deemed a security risk?" Zahara asked directly, forcing them both to confront possibilities neither wanted to acknowledge. Ji-hoon's answer came after a pause that felt like digital eternity. "Then we'll have to decide which is more important, our individual careers or our collective future." The choice shouldn't have been complicated, but standing on Chol-sung's executive terrace with Seoul's transformed electrical infrastructure spreading beneath them, Zahara realized that some optimization problems couldn't be solved through algorithmic logic alone. Her quantum randomization protocols had defeated cyber warfare through controlled unpredictability, but the most important decisions in her life required embracing uncertainty that no algorithm could calculate or security investigation could quantify. The Korean National Assembly's hearing on critical infrastructure security convened at 9 a.m. on a crisp September morning, with Zahara Williams walking into the legislative chamber as the primary witness in what had become South Korea's most watched technology policy debate. Television cameras captured her entrance. Navy suit impeccable, tablet containing performance data that had revolutionized Korean electrical infrastructure, and the composed confidence of someone who'd survived cyber warfare to emerge as a national strategic asset. The hearing room's formal atmosphere reminded her of her MIT thesis defense, but with exponentially higher stakes. Assembly members, ministry officials, and technology experts filled rows that stretched toward imposing governmental architecture designed to emphasize institutional authority. Ms. Williams, the committee chair, began in English that carried diplomatic precision. Your algorithm currently manages electrical infrastructure for 15 million Korean citizens. Please explain how quantum randomization protocols ensure security against future cyber attacks. For the next 90 minutes, Zahara presented her technical innovations with the clarity of someone who'd spent months translating complex engineering concepts into accessible policy language. She described load-balancing algorithms, quantum uncertainty principles, and real-time adaptation protocols that had transformed theoretical research into practical infrastructure management. But the questions eventually moved beyond technical specifications into territory that made her pulse quicken. Ms. Williams, one assembly member asked with studied casualness, your personal relationship with Choelsung Tech's CEO has been subject to media speculation. How do Korean citizens ensure that strategic infrastructure decisions aren't influenced by personal considerations? The question struck like surgical precision at the intersection of her professional competence and personal vulnerability. Around the hearing room, she could feel attention focusing with laser intensity on her response. Honorable Assembly Member, she replied, her voice carrying the steel of someone who'd fought these battles before. Algorithm performance is measured by quantifiable results, not personal relationships. Seoul's power grid doesn't care about corporate romance. It responds to mathematical precision and engineering excellence. She activated her tablet and displayed performance metrics on the chamber's main screen. 34% reduction in power waste. 0 blackouts during extreme weather events. Successful defense against state-sponsored cyber attacks. These results were achieved through technical innovation, not personal influence. The data was undeniable, but she could see assembly members calculating political implications that extended beyond algorithmic efficiency. Furthermore, she continued, pushing beyond defensive responses toward strategic offense. Korean technological independence requires embracing talent regardless of nationality or personal circumstances. If South Korea wants to lead global infrastructure innovation, it needs to compete for the best engineers, not exclude them based on cultural comfort zones. The statement reframed the entire discussion from personal controversy to national technological strategy, forcing assembly members to consider whether Korean innovation required international perspective. After the hearing concluded with promises of continued support for critical infrastructure protection, Zahara found herself in Choelsung's executive lounge, where Ji-hoon waited with champagne and an expression that mixed relief with something deeper: character profiles. The Ministry of Energy approved permanent expansion to all major Korean cities, he announced as she settled beside him on the leather sofa. Your algorithm will be managing the entire national electrical infrastructure within 18 months. The achievement was everything she'd dreamed of, but Ji-hoon's tone suggested additional news that complicated simple celebration. There's more, he continued, his voice softening as he produced a small leather box that made her heart stop despite her attempt to maintain analytical composure. The security investigation concluded that our relationship actually strengthens infrastructure protection rather than threatening it. Two strategic assets working in collaboration create redundancy and resilience that individual competence can't match. He opened the box to reveal a ring that captured Seoul's evening light, like crystallized algorithms, elegant, precise, and designed with the same attention to optimization that had characterized their entire relationship. "Zahara Williams," he said formally, "would you accept a merger proposal that combines our individual capabilities into a strategic partnership designed for maximum long-term performance?" The question was simultaneously the most romantic and most engineering-focused marriage proposal in corporate history, delivered with the precision of someone who understood that their love story had become intertwined with Korean technological leadership, character profiles. "Are you asking me to marry you or to become your business partner?" she asked, though her smile revealed that she understood the beautiful complexity of his proposition. "Both," Ji-hoon replied with the confidence of someone who'd calculated every variable except the quantum uncertainty of human emotion. Korean culture values partnerships that strengthen both individuals. American culture values relationships based on choice rather than obligation. I'm proposing we optimize for both." Zahara looked at the ring, then at the man who'd supported her through sabotage, cyber warfare, and media scrutiny to become her closest collaborator and unexpected love. Seoul's electrical infrastructure hummed invisibly around them, managed by algorithms that had grown from individual innovation into collaborative excellence. "Yes," she said simply, accepting both the ring and the partnership it represented. "But I have one condition. We implement joint decision-making protocols for all major life choices, with full transparency and equal authority." "Agreed," Ji-hoon replied, his CEO formality dissolving into genuine happiness as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Though I reserve the right to optimize our personal algorithms through ongoing collaboration." As Seoul's lights began their nightly dance across the Han River, and her monitoring systems confirmed another day of perfect electrical infrastructure performance, Zahara Williams realized that the most successful optimization wasn't her revolutionary algorithm. It was the love story that had grown from professional respect into personal partnership, engineered with the same precision and dedication that had transformed Korean electrical systems. And not 6 months after the National Assembly hearing, Chulsung Tech's headquarters had evolved into Seoul's unofficial center for critical infrastructure innovation, with government liaisons, international observers, and cybersecurity experts creating a constant flow of strategic collaboration. Zahara's wedding ring caught morning light as she reviewed performance data from 17 Korean cities, her algorithm now managing electrical infrastructure for 32 million citizens, with efficiency metrics that had attracted global attention. The morning briefing included updates from Busan's Port Authority, where her load-balancing protocols were optimizing shipping container refrigeration systems, and from Jeju Island's renewable energy integration, where quantum randomization was managing solar and wind power fluctuations with unprecedented precision. The European Union is requesting technical consultation on grid modernization. Dr. Sarah Kim reported from her position as Director of International Technology Transfer, a role created specifically to manage global interest in Chulsung's innovations. Germany, France, and the Netherlands want to implement modified versions of your algorithm for winter heating optimization. David Chen, now promoted to Senior Systems Architect, added his own update from across the conference table. The Japanese government's preliminary inquiry about earthquake-resistant power grid design arrived this morning. They're specifically interested in quantum randomization for maintaining electrical stability during seismic events. The international recognition represented validation that Zahara's engineering innovations were transforming infrastructure management beyond Korean borders, but it also meant increased complexity in balancing technological sharing with national competitive advantages. Ji-hoon entered the conference room with the quiet authority that had become more pronounced since their engagement, his leadership style evolving to accommodate Chul Sung's transformation from domestic corporation to international strategic asset, character profiles. Government security advisors flanked him, a new reality that reflected their elevated status in Korean technological hierarchy. The Ministry of Trade has approved technology licensing agreements with 7 countries, he announced, settling beside Zahara with the casual intimacy of partners whose professional collaboration had strengthened through personal commitment. Revenue projections suggest Chul Sung will become Korea's largest technology exporter within 3 years. The success was extraordinary, but Zahara had learned to read the subtle tensions that accompanied exponential growth. "What's the complication?" she asked, recognizing the pattern of good news followed by strategic challenges. "China is offering direct recruitment packages worth $50 million annually," Ji-hoon replied with the tone of someone delivering unwelcome but expected news. "Not just for you, for our entire algorithm development team. They want to relocate Chul Sung's core technical capabilities to Shanghai." The offer represented economic warfare disguised as employment opportunity, designed to transfer Korean technological advantages to Chinese infrastructure development. It was the kind of strategic threat that required responses extending far beyond corporate human resources policies. Additionally, Dr. Sarah Kim added, "Industrial espionage attempts have increased dramatically. We've detected 17 different infiltration attempts in the past month, including physical surveillance, network penetration, and social engineering targeting team members' families." Zahara absorbed the security briefing while simultaneously monitoring real-time power consumption across the Korean peninsula. Her algorithm continued its quiet revolution in electrical infrastructure management, but success had created new categories of international competition that extended beyond technical innovation. "What are our response options?" she asked, her engineer's mind automatically seeking systematic solutions to strategic problems. Ji-hoon activated the conference room's privacy screens before answering, a precaution that had become routine for discussions involving national security implications. The Korean government is offering permanent strategic asset protection, including dedicated security teams, classified facility designation, and family protection protocols. In exchange, we commit to maintaining technological leadership within Korean jurisdiction. The offer was simultaneously flattering and constraining, recognition of their critical importance to national competitiveness, but also limitation of their personal freedom to make independent career decisions. "And if we decline government protection?" Zahara asked, though she suspected the answer involved accepting vulnerability that no private security could adequately address. "Then we manage international threats through private resources, while hoping that our innovations remain strategically valuable enough to justify the risks," Ji-hoon replied honestly. But industrial espionage at this level isn't just corporate competition. It's economic warfare that individual companies can't fight alone. The conversation was interrupted by urgent chimes from Zahara's monitoring systems. She turned to her tablet to find alerts from Incheon International Airport, where unusual power consumption patterns suggested either equipment malfunction or deliberate interference with critical infrastructure. Airport security is reporting systematic overloads in cargo facility refrigeration systems, she announced, her fingers flying across holographic displays as she traced the anomaly's source. "Someone's testing response protocols by creating isolated failures that don't trigger major alerts." The pattern was familiar, probing attacks designed to map system vulnerabilities without creating obvious damage. It was exactly the kind of sophisticated intelligence gathering that preceded major infrastructure assault. "Can you counter it?" Ji-hoon asked, his CEO authority balanced by personal concern for someone whose technical brilliance had made her a permanent target. "Already doing it," Zahara replied, implementing real-time countermeasures that rerouted airport power through backup systems while her algorithm analyzed the attack's digital signature. "But this confirms what we already knew. Our success has made us strategic assets, whether we want that status or not." As Seoul's afternoon energy demands settled into predictable patterns, and her quantum randomization protocols successfully defeated another probing attack, Zahara Williams realized that her greatest engineering challenge wasn't technical. It was designing a life that balanced personal happiness with the responsibilities that came from revolutionizing critical infrastructure in an increasingly dangerous world. The algorithm of love had proved more complex than power grid optimization, but infinitely more rewarding than any professional achievement could provide. The Chulsung Tech Board meeting that would determine the company's strategic direction for the next decade convened in the glass conference room overlooking Seoul's sprawling technological landscape, with representatives from the Ministry of Energy, National Intelligence Service, and Korean Development Bank, creating the kind of institutional oversight that accompanied decisions of national significance. Zahara entered the room as Chulsung's newly appointed Chief Technology Officer, her algorithm now managing electrical infrastructure for 45 million Korean citizens, while generating international licensing revenue that had transformed the company into Asia's most valuable energy technology corporation. The promotion had been unanimous. Recognition that technical innovation had become inseparable from corporate leadership in the modern technological economy. Ladies and gentlemen, Ji-hoon began from his position at the conference table's head, his CEO authority now balanced by partnership with someone whose engineering expertise had redefined Korean infrastructure capabilities. Today, we're deciding whether Chulsung Tech expands internationally or maintains domestic focus while licensing technology to global partners. The choice represented fundamentally different visions of corporate growth. Direct international expansion that would require relocating key personnel to multiple countries, or strategic licensing that would maintain Korean technological control while generating revenue through intellectual property management. Dr. Sarah Kim presented the international expansion proposal with slides displaying potential markets across Asia, Europe, and North America. Direct implementation would generate an estimated 400 billion won annually within 5 years, but would require establishing permanent technical teams in 12 countries. David Chen followed with the licensing strategy analysis, his data showing lower revenue but reduced operational complexity. Technology transfer partnerships would generate 200 billion won annually while maintaining core development capabilities within Korean jurisdiction. The financial projections were impressive for both strategies, but Zahara could see board members calculating implications that extended beyond corporate profit margins. Chulsung had become too strategically important for purely business decisions. Ms. Williams, the ministry representative addressed her directly. Your technical assessment of operational risk versus strategic benefit. The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. As CTO of Korea's most valuable infrastructure technology company, her recommendation would influence national policy regarding technological competitiveness and security. The algorithm's success demonstrates that innovation requires both technical excellence and cultural understanding, Zahara replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone whose engineering decisions had proved unbreakable under pressure. International expansion would dilute our cultural advantage while exposing core technologies to industrial espionage. She activated her tablet to display performance comparisons from 17 Korean cities. Our competitive advantage isn't just algorithmic. It's the deep integration between technology and Korean infrastructure patterns, social behaviors, and energy consumption cultures. That integration can't be replicated quickly in foreign markets. The analysis was sophisticated and strategic, but board members recognized the personal implications underlying her recommendation. International expansion would require extended travel, potentially years of overseas assignment, and separation from the Korean cultural context where her professional and personal relationships had flourished. Therefore, she continued, I recommend strategic licensing with mandatory technology transfer partnerships that require foreign companies to establish permanent Korean research facilities. We maintain technological control while generating international revenue. Ji-hoon smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose professional partner had just provided the strategic framework he'd been hoping to hear. The licensing strategy also allows us to maintain family stability while building global influence, he added, his comment carrying personal meaning that didn't escape board attention: character profiles. The vote was unanimous: strategic licensing with Korean-based technology transfer, generating international revenue while maintaining domestic strategic control. As the meeting concluded with implementation timelines and partnership negotiations, Zahara found herself on Chulsung's executive terrace with Ji-hoon, reviewing the decision that would define their corporate and personal future for the next decade. "No regrets about turning down direct international expansion?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. "Korean electrical infrastructure taught my algorithm everything it knows about optimization," she replied, watching Seoul's afternoon energy consumption settle into patterns her system had learned to predict with quantum precision. "But Korean culture taught me everything I know about partnership, persistence, and finding success through collaborative excellence rather than individual achievement." The confession carried weight that extended beyond professional decision-making into territory that had redefined her understanding of success itself. "Besides," she added with the smile that had first captured his attention during that 10-minute presentation months ago, "the most successful algorithm I've ever developed wasn't for power grid optimization. It was for finding love in the most unlikely corporate circumstances." Ji-hoon moved closer, his presence comfortable and familiar despite the formal conference setting. "And what does that algorithm predict for our future?" "Optimal performance through iterative collaboration," Zahara replied, using engineering terminology to express emotional certainty that transcended professional language. With continuous debugging, regular optimization updates, and commitment to shared goals that prioritize collective success over individual achievement. As Seoul's electrical infrastructure hummed invisibly around them, managed by quantum algorithms that had revolutionized Korean energy efficiency, Zahara Williams realized that her greatest engineering achievement wasn't technical. It was designing a life that balanced professional innovation with personal partnership, creating something more powerful and resilient than either individual contribution could have provided. The algorithm of love had proved more complex than power grid management, but infinitely more rewarding than any technological breakthrough could deliver. Chrat. 2 years later, conference opened with Zahara Williams delivering the keynote address to 3,000 engineers, policymakers, and corporate leaders from 47 countries. Her presentation titled "Quantum Infrastructure: Lessons from Korean Innovation," drawing standing ovations as she described algorithmic approaches that had become the global standard for critical systems management. Chulsung Tech's headquarters had evolved into Korea's unofficial embassy for infrastructure technology, with permanent research partnerships extending across Asia, Europe, and North America, while maintaining technological development within Korean jurisdiction. The licensing strategy had generated revenue exceeding initial projections by 200%, establishing South Korea as the dominant global authority on quantum-assisted power grid optimization. The algorithm now manages electrical infrastructure for over 100 million citizens across 12 countries. Zahara announced to the conference audience, her data displays showing performance metrics that had transformed theoretical research into practical global implementation. But the real innovation wasn't technical. It was cultural integration that allows algorithms to learn from local behaviors, preferences, and consumption patterns. In the VIP section, Ji-hoon watched with the pride of someone whose corporate partnership had evolved into personal marriage and professional collaboration that had redefined both individual careers, character profiles. Their wedding 18 months earlier had been covered by international media as a symbol of Korean technological leadership and global cultural integration. Dr. Sarah Kim, now director of the newly established Korea Institute for Infrastructure Innovation, provided technical commentary from the conference's expert panel. "Ms. Parks," she caught herself with a smile. Dr. Parks' approach demonstrates that breakthrough innovation requires both mathematical precision and cultural wisdom. Technical excellence without social integration creates solutions that work in laboratories but fail in real-world implementation. The name change had been Zahara's choice, adopting Korean cultural tradition while maintaining her professional identity. Dr. Zahara Williams Park represented the synthesis of American educational background, Korean cultural adoption, and international technological leadership. David Chen, now Chulsung's Senior Director of International Systems, managed technology transfer partnerships from his position as the company's primary liaison with global infrastructure authorities. The quantum randomization protocols have prevented 47 major cyber attacks across participating countries, he reported during the conference's security panel. But more importantly, they've established new standards for algorithmic defense that prioritize adaptability over predictability. The success had created new categories of international competition, with Chinese and American technology companies attempting to recruit Chulsung's core team through offers that exceeded $100 million annually. All had been declined. Loyalty to Korean technological independence had become both personal commitment and national strategy. The most significant challenge, Zahara explained during the conference's closing session, wasn't developing algorithms that could manage electrical infrastructure. It was creating corporate culture that prioritizes excellence over hierarchy, innovation over tradition, and collaborative problem-solving over individual achievement. The statement resonated beyond technical implementation into broader questions of organizational development that had attracted global attention to Korean management philosophy. After the conference concluded with commitments for expanded international cooperation and technology sharing agreements, Zahara found herself in Chulsung's executive lounge with Ji-hoon, reviewing performance reports that showed their algorithm managing infrastructure across continents with reliability that had become the global benchmark for critical systems. The Korean government is offering permanent strategic advisor status, Ji-hoon mentioned casually, though both understood the significance of institutional recognition at the highest levels of national policy. Cabinet-level consultation on all major infrastructure decisions. The appointment would represent culmination of her transformation from foreign graduate student to Korean strategic asset. But Zahara had learned that professional success required balancing individual achievement with relationship maintenance, character profiles. "And what does my husband think about his wife becoming a government official?" she asked, using terminology that still felt miraculous despite 18 months of marriage. "Your husband thinks," Ji-hoon replied with the intimate tone that had developed through years of professional collaboration and personal partnership, that Korea is fortunate to have someone who combines American innovation with Korean wisdom to create solutions that neither culture could develop independently. Through Chulsung's panoramic windows, Seoul's electrical infrastructure pulsed with algorithmic precision that had eliminated blackouts, reduced carbon emissions by 40%, and established South Korea as the global leader in sustainable energy management. But the most successful optimization, Zahara realized as she reviewed performance data from across the Korean peninsula, hadn't been technical. It had been personal. The algorithm of love that had taught her to balance professional ambition with cultural integration, individual achievement with collaborative excellence, and revolutionary innovation with institutional stability. Her monitoring systems chimed with routine updates from 17 countries where her quantum algorithms managed critical infrastructure with performance that exceeded every engineering projection. But her attention was focused on something more complex and rewarding: the life she'd engineered through careful attention to partnership, persistence, and the understanding that the most powerful innovations emerged from synthesis rather than replacement. Seoul's lights began their nightly dance across the Han River. each illumination managed by algorithms that had grown from individual brilliance into collaborative excellence. Zahara Williams Park had come to Korea to prove her technical competence, but she'd discovered that the greatest engineering challenges involved optimizing human relationships for maximum performance, reliability, and long-term sustainability. The algorithm of love had proved more complex than power grid management, but infinitely more rewarding than any technological breakthrough could provide.